if you're expecting full Maller monologue coverage on every random thing that pops up, probably not going to happen. But our lead this hour coming from the Queen City. And that was the scene of the much-anticipated Monday Night Football game, the Bengals and the Bills, a matchup of AFC heavyweights. And as you likely know by now, the game, not what we're going to talk about. There's something happened in the game. Cincinnati was leading Buffalo 7-3 early. The Bengals won the coin toss, elected to receive, and ended up getting a touchdown. Bills got the field goal, and then the Bengals got the ball back, and that's when the music stopped. And if you were late to the party, somehow you were not locked in, you haven't been listening, I think the whole network's been wall-to-wall coverage here for hours on this story. We will continue through the overnight hours if anything develops here. But Cincinnati leading the game. The Bengals had the ball. They were matriculating the ball down the field against the Bills. And the game ended up being suspended and then eventually postponed. What does that mean? We'll find out more on that later, following the shocking injury to the Bills safety, Damar Hamlin. Now, the play in question, Hamlin tackled T. Higgins in the first quarter as they were moving the ball across the midfield logo there in Cincinnati. And he popped up on his feet and then immediately collapsed to the ground. He stayed down there for almost 20 minutes. Paramedics brought the ambulance out on the field to expedite the care. And Hamlin, one report from Fox 19 Cincinnati said he had a pulse, but was not breathing. And that's why they conducted CPR, and also the defibrillator was used as well on the field in front of thousands of people that were watching in the stadium. Was not shown on television. And then Hamlin was taken to the University of Cincinnati Medical Center. The entire Bills team gathered around Hamlin. They were holding hands, they're praying, all that. Devastating scene. Hamlin, as we said, rushed to the hospital. His mother joined him in the ambulance. He's only 24 years old. And after about, it seemed like 10 hours, but I think it was less than that, the NFL then finally announced the game had been postponed via Roger Goodell, as the player in question here, Damar Hamlin, listed in critical condition. A gentleman named Jordan Rooney, who is Hamlin's friend and marketing rep, said that Hamlin's vitals were back to normal and that they're running tests. He's in the hospital, obviously. And the Buffalo Bills, just before we cracked the mics here, on their social media, they released a statement, the Bills saying that Damar Hamlin suffered a cardiac arrest following the hit in the game versus the Bengals. His heartbeat was restored, and on the field, he was taken to the medical center, as we said there, and further testing. He's currently sedated, and he is listed in critical condition. So let us discuss the question here. What is your reaction to all of this? The injury, if you're watching the Monday night game or tuning in on the radio, your reaction to the injury to the Bills safety, Damar Hamlin. And I'll go first here. So my 10 cents on this, my reaction is pretty standard. When I was watching, I was like, there's nothing going on. It's like, this is normal, normal play. Get up, dust it off. That was my initial reaction. And it was like, it didn't seem like anything out of the ordinary. I mean, I watch a lot of football doing this job, and it didn't seem like this crossed the threshold of, oh my God, this is the worst. And we have been conditioned to know that these gridiron gladiators are indestructible. It's a collision sport, right? It's a contact sport. Knock them down, and then they get back up and you play again. And when ESPN showed the replay on the Joe Buck, Troy Aikman fiesta there, the play in question, again, it did not look like it had crossed any boundaries. But then upon further review, after looking like a standard play where Damar Hamlin tackles T. Higgins, and we've seen a similar type collision multiple times. I was just on Sunday. I was watching football. I saw a play like that multiple times on Sunday. It's a kosher play. It was only after they showed the full clip there where Hamlin stands up and then collapse that this became a much different Much different situation and different than all other NFL players. And then you see the reaction shots, the raw emotion of the player reactions from both sides there, and you knew something's not right. Now, typically, having been to a few of these NFL games over the year, if you ever attended or you've been there, you know the way this works. The players on the field, they're the ones that are tipped off to what's going on. Bad news travels fast. When a guy gets tossed down and the medical staff comes out, word travels like, well, it's his knee or it's his shoulder, or it's a concussion. In this instance, the medical staff for the Bills came out, and the Bengals medical staff, they both ran out. And they had looks of apprehension. And that ain't good. And this became a DEFCON 1 situation, Code 3, lights, sirens, emergency, that whole thing. And when the medical professionals, when they are in a state of flummox, and that's what they do for a living, then you're like, wait a minute here. And so at that point, they're like, okay. You're wondering, your mind starts to wander to some deep, dark places. Now, furthermore, the fact, and the Bills just released the statement before we cracked the microphones here in the wee hours of the morning, and the fact that the Bills are still, they've confirmed the initial report, he's still in critical condition. You wouldn't expect that to change overnight. A key piece of information, I don't think we realize, you hear critical condition, you're like, okay, what does that mean? Well, the definition is, as I understand it, critical condition is defined as uncertain prognosis, vital signs unstable or abnormal. There are major complications and death may be imminent. That's the definition of critical condition. Unfortunately, I've had relatives that have been in critical condition over the years, and so I've dealt with that. This is obviously a different situation because as a football player, it's a blunt force injury. So what happened on the tackle that caused this to happen? Now, as you know, doing an overnight radio show, we are not trained doctors. We are not. But there is a lot of chatter, and this is where we turn to our friends who have taken the Hippocratic Oath, the streets chirping. And the Bills, as they said, it was a cardiac arrest that took place. And that backs up the hypothesis that has been bouncing around here. Now, it's not confirmed. It's a consensus among some medical professionals who like to chirp on social media that the player in question here, Damar Hamlin, most likely suffered from something called a commotio cordis. I believe that's how it's pronounced, although I probably butchered it. What is that? It is a blunt force injury to the chest. It's very rare, and I was reading about this because this is the popular theory. We'll find out more in the coming days and weeks whether this is actually what happened, but the popular theory is that it's really just about bad timing, and that it's so rare that it happens just a few times a year in all of sport. But it's essentially where the cardiac rhythm is messed up, right? It's messed up there, and it is said to be a fraction of a second window. Think about this. You think about the fragility of life, but there's a fraction of a second window. And if you make contact or get hit in just the wrong location at exactly the wrong time, you have caused your heart to short circuit. Think about that. Isn't that wild? I mean, it's craziness. But that's what that is. And we don't know if this is exactly what happened to this Bills player, but that is what's the popular theory here is that's what led to the cardiac event, that he was hit in the chest, or he actually made the contact with T. Higgins. There was a collision, and it just happened at that perfect window where the heartbeat was in the wrong spot, and then that led to the need to reboot the heart on the field, restart the old engine there. And it's also possible it could have been some undiagnosed cardiac event. There's all kinds of conspiracy theories bouncing around and go on and on that. All right, last thing here. So is there anything that the NFL can do down the line to prevent these type of situations? So it's very rare, right? There's going to be a thorough review, frame by frame. Every grain of sand will be examined. You're going to have a caravan of lawyers that will be involved in this, NFL investigators, doctors, medical experts, And then you'll have other activists that'll be involved. It's not safe. Shut down the NFL. All that's going to take place. So it's depending on what obviously happens next. But I wouldn't be shocked if Congress gets involved, that we have a congressional hearing on this in terms of player safety. But ultimately, there's only so much you can do. Right? Much like life, nothing is guaranteed. I have a friend of mine that I haven't seen. I was talking to Harmon and Jason Smith. I was coming in here. I was like, there's a buddy that we kind of all know, and I haven't seen him in years because he's freaked out by the COVID. He won't leave his house. And I'm like, dude, you got to live your life, man. It's short. Life is short. You got to go out and live your life. You can't be freaking out about everything. And obviously this is something where it's such a freak thing that happened. And you think about how many tackles are made, how many collisions happen in the NFL, and it would appear at this point, based on the information we have at this part of the story, that there's just a perfect storm that took place. But the lesson is there's nothing you can't prevent everything. And with any kind of movement that you make, you have to weigh the risks of what you're doing and decide whether it's worth your trouble. And while many football players get mangled, think about this, the 100-plus year history of the NFL, only one player has died on the playing field, a guy named Chuck Hughes back in the early 1970s for the Lions. And he died of a heart attack in a game against the Chicago Bears, and he didn't even play the first 3 quarters of the game. He was on the bench. I was reading about this because I didn't know much about the story. And then with 10 minutes to go in the game, he came on the field. There was an injured player for the Lions, and he came on the field. And then with 2 minutes left, he caught a pass. This guy, Chuck Hughes, he then, with 62 seconds left, so a little over a minute, he collapsed on the field at the old Tiger Stadium in Detroit. Now, this is 1971, so we're going way back in the hot tub time machine. And some of the Bears players, the legend is, thought that Chuck Hughes was faking it to get an extra timeout. They thought it was all a gag. And so they started yelling and cursing at the guy and saying, "What are you doing, you knucklehead?" He wasn't faking. He was dead. The guy was dead. And the doctors they try to revive the guy. They put him in the ambulance, and they took him away, and they played the rest of the game. They didn't even stop the game. They played the rest of the game. There was no social media in 1971. It was a different time. You didn't have to worry about the blowback too much. And it turned out the guy had a heart attack. His arteries were clogged, and that's what triggered the whole thing. And the family, by the way, did not blame football. The family of the NFL player that had died in 1971 did not blame football. They blamed the hospital. And they said that the hospital, the medical people should have diagnosed his condition earlier, and they sued. And, of course, they did, and they won $21.5. Well, they sued for $21 million. They won an out-of-court settlement for less than that. So we'll see what happens with this story. We'll take your calls. We'll open up the lines. A lot of calls on the overnight tonight. Feeling it. Why not? 877-99 on Fox if you want to be part. Again, the latest statement released by the Bills within the last half hour here that it was a cardiac arrest and the heartbeat has been restored, but you wonder how much damage was done. Hopefully not much at all. A young man. They tell you, the doctors, the younger you are, the better you are, right? They always say that. The younger you are, the better off you are with medical situations. So he's got that on his side.